This episode of Hot Cup Cold Case contains disturbing details about a violent crime and may not be appropriate for some listeners.
I'm Rachel.
I'm Brant.
And this is Hot Cup
Cold Case, where we share with you the two things that keep us up at night. And the first is a hot cup of caffeine, and the second is a cold case. This episode, I'm going to be sharing a cold case with you that Rachel knows nothing about, and then she's going to share a closed case with us that I know nothing about. And then we'll end the episode with a short but strange criminal case we like to call a mugshot. And this one is about a wheelchair bandit.
What? I'm excited about that.
But before we get into that, Rach and I got to go on a date.
Oh yeah, it was our first date in a while.
Yeah, as a Christmas gift, a friend of ours offered to watch our daughter for free one night.
And she put her to bed, and she even did my dishes.
Oh yeah, she's incredible.
Yeah, it was so nice.
So we went out to eat, and I ordered a special gift for you, but it didn't come in time for our date. It actually came in just today. So hold on, let me get it.
Oh, you're going to show it to me on air?
Yeah.
All right.
Hold on.
Okay.
It's nothing big.
You're so crazy.
I got you this.
Oh, he got me the Office version of Clue.
Yes, we don't have the Clue board game.
Yeah, we don't have it at all. Not even the classic version. This is so cool. We just started rewatching The Office again, and it's poor Toby. Who killed Toby? It's always Toby. Bless his heart.
All of the rooms in the original Clue house are actually like different offices in Dunder Mifflin, and you have to figure out who murdered Toby Flenderson. Yeah, and look at the weapons. There's the world's best coffee mug from Michael Scott's desk.
Oh my gosh, the bacon grill. That's my favorite.
I love the rabid bat.
Oh, the Dundies.
The Dundee. There's a little Dundee.
Oh my gosh. Wait, the nunchucks, Dwight's nunchucks.
Then there's a ream of Dunder Mifflin paper.
Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh, that's so great.
Guys, if you're a fan of The Office, number one, you have to get this Clue game. Number two, you have to listen to the Office Ladies podcast with Angela Kinsey and Jenna Fisher. And number three, you need to come over and hang out with us, because if you love The Office, we're going to get along just fine.
Yeah, but don't come if you're weird. Like, if you're a creeper, please don't come.
Rach, I hate to tell you this, but I think we're the weird ones.
I mean, that is probably true. That is probably very true.
Oh, I don't think I've ever mentioned this to our listeners, but all of our episodes on Hot Cup Cold Case are actually titled the way you would solve a game of Clue. It's the name of the suspect, the place, and the weapon.
Fun fact.
Oh, Rach, I have to tell you this story about something that happened in town this week.
In our town?
In our town.
Like this town?
Yes, I read this in the news. So a sheriff in our town was on his way home one day this week when he came across one of his department's police SUVs driving down the road.
Okay.
And as he pulled up alongside the vehicle, he noticed a couple of details about it that weren't really consistent with the SUVs he was so familiar with.
Oh, no.
Because he's the sheriff.
Oh, no.
So the sheriff ran the plates and discovered that it was registered to an individual.
Oh, no.
Rather than a police department. So he pulled the driver over, and as he approached the vehicle, a man rolled down the window and asked, "Who are you?"
Oh.
And the sheriff said, "I'm the sheriff. Who are you?" And he then arrested the man and conducted a thorough search of the vehicle. And in addition to the fake emergency lights and police decals that were installed on the outside of the SUV.
Oh my gosh.
The windows were tinted, and inside he found a fake radar scanner, a loaded handgun,
oh no,
a large Bowie knife, and a cage.
What?
Labeled Canine Police.
Oh my god.
Only the man isn't a police officer and he doesn't have a police canine. So he's currently being investigated because police aren't really sure what his plans were.
Oh, no. I don't
Isn't
like
that scary?
Yes.
He had all the lights and everything.
I need to see what it looks like. I gotta look it up now.
Remember when I read you the crime report for our town?
Yeah, can we not
This
talk
is
about
why.
that?
You can't even trust the cops in this town.
So disturbing.
It's for that reason that I think it's actually legal to call 911 if you're being pulled over, but you feel like something is strange, like you're in a bad part of town or it's an
usually like an
unmarked police
unmarked.
car. Yeah.
No, that's so disturbing that it's marked and he had decals put on and lights put on.
Yeah, the only one who noticed the difference was the sheriff himself. So just thought I'd warn you.
Oh,
So
I'm not pulling over for no one. Y'all might see me on the news. It's a chase.
Well, are you ready to hear about a cold case?
I am.
Rach is painting her nails inside of the blanket for tonight, and
Are you dying?
you're gassing me out.
I'm sorry. I know. And it's like this nail strengthener. So it is really, really chemically.
So this is going to be a wild episode the longer we're in this tent.
Did you have to Google Translate all week?
No.
Okay.
This one took place on American soil. And in fact, several of the people who have investigated this case have wound up dead.
Oh.
So
Well, great.
we'll see how this goes.
Great.
Buckle up. This is the case of Charles Morgan, or as he was known by his family, Chuck. So, in the 1970s, Chuck was the president of his own escrow agency located in Tucson, Arizona, where he and his wife, Ruth, had 4 daughters together. On Tuesday, March 22nd, 1977, Chuck, who was 39 years old at the time, left his home to drive 2 of his 4 daughters to school. Later that night, Chuck's family began to worry about him when he didn't return home as usual.
The girls did?
The girls did.
Okay.
But Chuck didn't come home from work.
Oh, no.
A few days later, without any word from Chuck, around 2 o'clock in the morning, Chuck's wife, Ruth, was suddenly awoken by a strange sound in her house.
Oh, no.
And I'm going to tell this part of the story in her words.
Oh, no.
Quote, I was in bed and the dog started barking. I got up and there was a thump against the back door. I went to the door and opened it.
Who does that?
And there was Chuck.
Well, what was he doing?
It had been 3 days
I would have killed him.
since he disappeared. She said, and he was missing a shoe. He had one plastic handcuff around one ankle. I believe she's talking about zip ties.
Oh, okay.
And his hands were still bound as well.
Oh, God.
He kept motioning to his throat
Oh, no.
because he hadn't said a word. I asked him, can you write? And he shook his head, yes. He wrote that his throat had been painted with a hallucinogenic drug.
What?
And that the drug could drive him irrevocably insane or destroy his nervous system and kill him. And he wanted the car moved. He wanted it moved immediately because he said he didn't want them to know he was home. He wouldn't tell me who they were, and I wanted to call a doctor, and I wanted to call the police, but he was adamant. And then he wrote out, that would be like signing a death warrant for the entire family.
What?
End quote. So over the course of the next week, Ruth nursed Chuck back to health by feeding him water with an eyedropper. He was in really rough shape. I've had to nurse you back to health a couple times.
Yes, you have. And IU.
Yes. I think the first time was when we were dating and you had your wisdom teeth removed.
Oh, such a terrible experience. We don't have to talk about it, Brant. Don't embarrass me or I will embarrass you.
I just remember you couldn't brush your teeth for a
Brant?
week. And that was when I knew I loved you, because even your raging halitosis couldn't keep me away.
And you have raging halitosis every day.
That's
buddy.
true. I've got it on the reg.
Yes, you do.
The second time was when you had those stents put in your kidneys.
I know. Let's not even talk about this.
Oh, man, it was so sad. I remember immediately after the operation, you were placed in a room.
Brant, stop telling people my stories.
This is such a good one. This is one of my favorite Rachel stories.
I don't react well to anesthesia. Go ahead.
So you were placed in a room full of other patients who were experiencing the effects of their anesthesia wearing off as well. And all of you were separated by a thin curtain. And I remember the poor guy next to us was apparently in a lot of pain because he just kept moaning like really loudly. And at one point you asked me, what is that sound? And you were like super irritated. And I was in the middle of telling you, oh, it's just the guy in the bed beside you. And when you interrupted me and you yelled at him, oh my God, shut up! This poor guy, he's in so much pain.
He's probably being a baby. I'm sorry, but all men are babies.
You do have a really high pain tolerance.
Well, my mom would say I don't. She'd say I'm just a wuss because she has an abnormal pain tolerance. Like, it's not normal at all. It's off the charts. Like, doctors have to be extremely careful with her.
Didn't her appendix rupture at one point?
No, it burst. But she went on with a ruptured appendix first for like 3 weeks. And then it finally burst and almost killed her. They had to put her in a coma. We almost lost her like 3 times. All of her organs started shutting down. It was crazy. And before she left, the doctor told her, I need to move your port. I'll have the nurse come in, numb you up, and then I'll do it, and then you can leave. So at this point, my mom's been in the hospital for like a month. So she is ready to get out of there. She's just ready to go home.
Yeah, I bet.
The nurse never came in to numb her. So the doctor came back in, starts to slice her open, to move the port.
Uh-huh.
And she winced. So the doctor said, oh my gosh, can you feel that? And my mom lied and said no. So he continued cutting her, moved the port over.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I passed out on the floor. So yeah, she thinks I'm a big baby.
That's my mother-in-law, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
We have so many Audrey stories,
Mm-hmm.
but we'll have to get into those at another time. Back to Chuck and Ruth.
Okay.
So Ruth is nursing Chuck back to health, and Chuck's voice slowly begins to return. And that's when he revealed to her that he actually had a secret identity. He told her that for the past several years, he had been working as a secret agent for the federal government in an effort to prosecute organized crime in the area. Ruth said, quote, he wrote, they took my treasury identification. And that's the first I'd heard of it. He wouldn't talk to me about it. He wrote that he had been working for them for about 2 or 3 years, and that was it. End quote.
Nope.
You think he's lying?
Yeah, I just don't think I believe anyone that said that they were like some secret agent with a double life.
Yeah, it seems like he's being really vague. But also, this would be kind of a weird story to make up if you were trying to cover something up. So, in the wake of his kidnapping, Chuck grew increasingly paranoid. He grew a beard, began wearing a bulletproof vest, and began personally escorting his daughters to and from their school. So he's like really paranoid.
Right.
He also instructed the school's administration not to allow his daughters to leave campus with anyone other than himself. A few months passed like this. And then sometime around May, Ruth said, quote, he went up to his parents' house and he was talking to his father and told him that if anything happened to him, there was a letter explaining why, how, and who, end quote.
Where's the letter?
That's the thing, because that was the last morning anybody saw Chuck.
What?
Once again, Chuck had mysteriously vanished without a word. And as for the letter he had mentioned to his father, Ruth said the letter never surfaced.
Oh, man.
More than a week went by, and then one day, Ruth received a strange phone call. When she answered the phone, she heard a woman's voice say, Ruthie? And Ruth said, yes. And the woman said, Chuck is all right. Ecclesiastes 12, 1-8. And then she hung up. Ruth had no idea who this woman was or what she meant by mentioning a book from the Bible, but she decided to look up the Bible verse the caller had referenced, and this is what she found. Don't let the excitement of youth cause you to forget your Creator. Honor Him in your youth before you grow old and say, life is not pleasant anymore. Remember Him before the light of the sun, moon, and stars is dim to your old eyes, and rain clouds continually darken your sky. Remember Him before your legs, the guards of your house, start to tremble, and before your shoulders, the strong men, stoop. Remember Him before your teeth, your few remaining servants, stop grinding, and before your eyes, the women looking through the windows see dimly. Remember him before the door to life's opportunities is closed and the sound of work fades. Now you rise at the first chirping of the birds, but then all their sounds will grow faint. Remember him before you become fearful of falling and worry about danger in the streets, before your hair turns white like an almond tree in bloom and you drag along without energy like a dying grasshopper, and the caperberry no longer inspires sexual desire. Remember him before you near the grave, your everlasting home, when the mourners will weep at your funeral. Yes, remember your Creator now while you are young, before the silver cord of life snaps and the golden bowl is broken. Don't wait until the water jar is smashed at the spring and the pulley is broken at the well, for then the dust will return to the earth and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Everything is meaningless, says the teacher. Completely meaningless.
That's weird.
Isn't that weird?
Yes. We assume it's him, though, talking through this woman, right? I mean, I do, but what do you think that means?
You know, normally Bible verses inspire me. This one freaks me out.
Yeah.
A couple more days passed, and Chuck had now been missing for 11 days.
Mm-mm.
And then, 40 miles outside of Tucson, along a road somewhere in the desert, 39-year-old Chuck Morgan's body was discovered lying near his Mercury Cougar. When Pima County Sheriff's officials arrived, they found he had been shot once in the back of his head at close range, execution style.
That's what I was about to ask.
Lying next to him was his .357 caliber Magnum revolver. He was wearing his bulletproof vest, as well as a belt buckle that concealed a hidden knife.
Oh.
In his car, investigators found several weapons, along with a cache of ammunitions and a handkerchief. And when investigators collected the handkerchief, they discovered something strange. Wrapped inside was a single human tooth.
Huh.
They also found a handwritten note that appeared to have been written by Chuck himself, with directions to the crime scene, and a pair of sunglasses that did not belong to Chuck. They later confirmed that Chuck had in fact been shot with his own revolver.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no fingerprints on the gun. The tooth they had discovered wrapped in that handkerchief in his car also belonged to Chuck.
Oh.
And then police discovered something even more strange inside of Chuck's underwear.
Okay.
Pinned to the inside lining, they found a $2 bill. And you know what was written on it?
No.
Ecclesiastes 12.
1 through
8. It had arrows actually drawn to serial numbers to indicate verses 1 through 8. And there was a list of 7 Spanish names written on the bill,
What?
beginning with the letters A through G. I actually have pictures of this, and I'm going to show them to you, and I'll also put it on our Instagram for our listeners.
This
Because,
is weird.
Yeah, on the back of the bill, where the image of the men signing the Declaration of Independence is printed,
Mm-hmm.
all of the men in the image had been numbered 1 through 7, and there was a crude hand-drawn map of some roads between Tucson and the Mexico border. So then, 2 days into the investigation, police received an anonymous phone call themselves.
From the woman.
A woman. She identified herself only as Green Eyes. And over the phone, she told investigators that she was in fact the same woman who had contacted Ruth in the days leading up to Chuck's death. She also told them that she and Chuck had met at a West Side motel shortly before his death, where he had showed her a briefcase containing several $1,000s in cash. She claimed that Chuck told her he was in danger and that he was planning to buy himself out of a contract on his life. Additionally, Chuck's car was broken into while in police possession,
Oh.
and his office was later ransacked. But despite this strange series of events surrounding Chuck's murder, in an official statement to the press, Deputy Dawn Barker, a spokeswoman for the Pima County Sheriff's Department, announced that investigators had officially ruled Chuck's death a suicide,
What?
believing he had shot himself in the back of the head.
How?
However, the county's medical examiner officially listed Chuck's death as unsolved.
How do you shoot yourself in the back of the head?
Right? The Morgan family continued to believe Chuck had been murdered, and this is what Ruth had to say. quote, "There is no way Chuck would have committed suicide, and if he had even contemplated suicide, he would have left a letter for his girls and for me." And Don Devereaux, a reporter who investigated this story, said, quote, "It is not a very normal place to shoot oneself as a suicide.
Yes.
And bear in mind, he's wearing a bulletproof vest at the time.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
I've never seen, in all my years as a journalist, a fella take himself out in the desert wearing a bulletproof vest and shoot himself in the back of the head."
Yeah, that doesn't even make sense.
End quote. Actually, unend quote. Reopen quote. He went on to say, "There was a great likelihood that Mr. Morgan was, in fact, doing something with the government. I think this was a guy who was extremely naive about a lot of things. I think somebody blew his cover, and he got killed."
That's what the reporter said?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So 3 weeks after Chuck's death, 2 men claiming to be FBI agents showed up at Ruth's home. And I'm going to let Ruth take it from here. "They opened and closed their identification very fast," she said. "They said they wanted to come in and look through the house."
No.
She said, "I never thought at the time to ask them for a search warrant."
Ruth, number one problem there, girl. You don't watch enough true crime.
"They never said what they were looking for. To this day, I don't even know what they were looking for." So whether or not the men found anything, they didn't say. It's not even clear if they were really FBI agents at all. And when Devereaux, the reporter investigating Chuck's death, heard about the 2 men who had searched Ruth's home, he decided to contact the FBI himself. This is what he had to say. "When I made a formal Freedom of Information Act request to the FBI, they had never heard of Mr. Morgan.
What?
Despite the fact that they obviously opened an investigation, despite the fact that the FBI interviewed Mr. Morgan's attorney, they were all over this thing like a blanket for a while. But now they've never heard of the guy. He never existed. No card, no file, no nothing."
What?
Yeah. And that is when the case went cold.
Oh my gosh. So what was he into?
Here are the theories.
Give me the theories.
Some people theorize Chuck's meeting with Green Eyes at the West Side Motel could suggest the 2 were involved in an extramarital affair.
Oh, I don't want to think that.
And that maybe Chuck made up a series of elaborate lies to simply keep his family in the dark, including faking his own kidnapping.
Right.
And then maybe he was killed by a jealous lover or something. Speaking of faking your own kidnapping, I once had a friend in high school named Parker that told me he had been grounded for a week for binding and gagging his younger brother with duct tape and locking him in the bathroom.
I would have sent my kid to a psych hospital.
The thing is, his younger brother later confessed that he had bound and gagged himself.
What?
And locked himself in the bathroom to get his older brother Parker in trouble.
Just kidding. I would send the younger one to a psych hospital. That is disturbing.
Isn't that crazy?
No, that's straight up disturbing.
I met this kid, and he is totally capable of doing something like that.
Yeah, that's disturbing.
Yeah, so it does happen. Another theory about Chuck's death is it may have some connection with the Masonic Temple. In one of Devereaux's articles published in the Arizona Range News back in June of 1990, he states a few of the annotations on that $2 bill that they discovered in Chuck's underwear have apparent Masonic implications, which is an organization to which Chuck was deeply attached. Others theorize that although Chuck claimed to be working with the federal government to prosecute organized crime, he may have in fact been a part of the illegal affairs himself.
Oh, okay.
And just telling his wife that he was working with the government. Another theory is that Chuck may have worked as an escrow agent for a local crime boss who, fearing that Chuck may have known too much, could have ordered a hit on him. So there are a few details surrounding Chuck's death that actually may support this theory. Because back in the 1970s, Arizona actually became ground zero for a lot of organized crime syndicates.
Really?
Yes, there was a unique state law back then that permitted the purchase of land through a number of blind trust accounts, meaning property in Arizona could be purchased anonymously, making it easy for racketeers to launder their money because it couldn't be traced.
Huh. Interesting.
As an escrow agent, Chuck may have unknowingly found himself working with some of these very dangerous people.
Yeah, that's true.
Ruth even said once, quote, Chuck mentioned to me that there was money laundering going on in this town, but nothing that he himself was involved in. He told me the less the girls and I knew, the better off we would be.
Oh, that's comforting.
And Chuck was even rumored to be a potential witness in a state investigation into a known crime boss accused of land fraud. So it's possible that Chuck may have driven out to the desert to pay off a hired hitman who never intended to spare his life and instead killed him and took his money anyways.
Oh, man.
Devereaux, the reporter, said this: if the information that Green Eyes provided is accurate, it is, in a very perverse sense, remotely possible that Mr. Morgan paid for his own murder.
Oh, gosh.
Isn't that a scary thought?
Yeah, that's cringy.
Yeah. So decades later, on February 7th, 1990, the television show Unsolved Mysteries actually aired the story of Chuck Morgan's death.
Oh, okay.
So in their coverage of this case, they interviewed a retired lieutenant of the Pima County Sheriff's Department named Thad Curtis, and this is what he had to say regarding the investigation into Chuck's death. Quote, I was familiar with the intelligence officers working intelligence for the Sheriff's Department at the time. I had some conversation with them about this case. They thought it was a homicide and gang-related. They left the Sheriff's Department. I don't know if they left because of what they detected in this case or another case or a combination of cases, but they indicated they were in fear of their lives and actually left law enforcement. 2 of them left the continental U.S.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So there
So
may have
something
been
was going on.
some kind of corruption on the police force, which may also explain why the woman who called never gave her name to the police.
Oh, I guess that's true.
Following the broadcast, Unsolved Mysteries received several calls relating to Chuck's death. Devereaux, the reporter, investigated several of the leads himself, and that's when he discovered something strange with Chuck's escrow company.
Okay.
Devereaux said Chuck was around the edges of a couple of fairly large organized crime groups in Arizona at the time. The records begin in early 1973, and it would indicate that Chuck was doing perhaps upwards of $1 billion worth of work in gold bullion and platinum transactions.
What is the gold bullion?
Like gold bars.
Huh.
And these were transactions that only existed on paper. So Devereaux said, it is very easy to get in over your head, and I suspect that over the years, Mr. Morgan was in that kind of a situation. He was a straight businessman that probably got a little too close to the flame.
Oh, no.
So 3 months later, Devereaux himself would be haunted by another mysterious death. Doug Johnston, an employee of a computer graphics company in Phoenix, was found dead in his car outside his office.
Mm-hmm.
He had been shot once behind the ear, and the police suggested it was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. However, no gun was ever recovered from the scene.
Oh, yeah, so that's not possible.
The medical examiner couldn't determine whether Johnston's death was a suicide or a homicide either, and so his death remains unsolved to this day. But the reason why Johnston's death seems so strange is because he worked directly across the street from Don Devereaux's office, and he drove a very similar car. And Devereaux believes that Johnston was killed by mistake.
Oh.
And that he was the intended target.
Oh.
Devereaux said, I got a phone call from a journalist friend of mine from Washington, D.C. who had been briefed by a high-level CIA official that, in fact, that was a botched hit.
What?
That some people thought they were hitting me when they shot Johnston.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then a year after Johnston's murder, another mysterious death occurred. A writer from D.C. named Denny Casolaro, who had been investigating an organized crime syndicate called the Octopus, contacted Devereaux and said that during the course of his investigation, he had uncovered information about Chuck's illegal affairs. However, before the two writers had a chance to meet, a maid discovered Casolaro dead in his hotel room bathtub with both of his wrists slit.
Oh, God.
And there was an apparent suicide note that read, quote, to my loved ones, please forgive me, most especially my son, and be understanding. God will let me in.
What?
End quote. So investigators ruled his death a suicide as well. But the autopsy uncovered bruises on Casolaro's body that may suggest he was attacked shortly before he died. So Casolaro's death also remains unsolved to this day. So that's 3 unsolved deaths now.
That's crazy.
Ruth Morgan was haunted by Ecclesiastes 12, 1 through 8 for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
She said, I don't know what it means. There's a message there somewhere. I know there is, but I don't know what it means. Ruth died of cancer in 2006, and the couple's 4 daughters maintain that their father was murdered to protect the interests of corrupt businessmen and politicians. One of Chuck's daughters, Meg and Heidi, said, quote, my father had a lot of information about the people here in Tucson that could have been very detrimental. There was a lot of information about politicians, people who are still alive, that work in government. He had that information, and they wanted to silence him.
That's crazy.
And Devereaux, that reporter, said, I think the $2 bill provides the basis for some kind of cryptography. I think there is some basis of some kind of a code there. What seems to be missing, however, is the document that $2 bill would unlock. I think we need a companion piece to really make ultimate sense out of the $2 bill. And then he went on to say, if Chuck was quietly providing assistance to the U.S. government and monitoring the activities of one or more major organized crime families, he wasn't a villain. He was a good guy, and they need to know that. So that is the mysterious life and death of Chuck Morgan.
Yeah, poor Chuck. I wouldn't believe that he was a good guy. That just got wrapped up in the wrong thing. You know how he told his dad that if something happened to him, that he would leave a letter or the who, the what, the when, or wherever? Maybe that $2 bill was him leaving all of those answers, but no one knows what that means.
Nobody's been able to decode it.
But maybe to him, that was all his answers.
I think there's some kind of conspiracy going on here. Whether it involves law enforcement or not, I definitely think there was some kind of organized cover-up.
Oh, yeah, he couldn't. I just don't know how you could shoot yourself in the back of the head execution style. I mean, I guess you could.
Rachel is reaching around the back of her head right now to see if it's possible to shoot yourself in that way. Please stop.
I don't have a gun.
Yeah, I think the first time he went missing, he really was kidnapped. I mean, it took her a week just to nurse him back to health. So if he was faking his own kidnapping, he did a heck of a job banging himself up. But I think the second time he went missing, I think he really was trying to distance himself from his family if he found out about a hit on his life, because he didn't want his girls to be in danger.
Yeah, I mean, that's honorable if that was the case. Well, mine is equally as weird.
Well, it sounds like this episode is only about to get weirder.
It is.
Thanks to the nail polish fumes in our tent.
Oh, hush. This is bizarre. This case is bizarre. This is another, prolific serial killer who we've never heard of. This case is about the murders of helpless and innocent patients at various hospitals around the United States. Murders that are claimed to be, quote, mercy killings by the infamous Donald Harvey, or better known as the Angel of Death.
Oh, wow.
Do you know this case?
I don't, but when you say Angel of Death, does it have something to do with working in a hospital?
It does.
These are two of my worst nightmares, a killer and a hospital.
Bizarre case. Harvey was born in Butler County, Ohio, close to Cincinnati in 1952. When he was 6 months old, his father dropped him on his head, resulting in a closed head injury.
Okay, we're off to a rough start.
Yeah. And I'm in no way implying that that was deliberate or from lack of care or concern. I think it could have been just an accident. I'm just stating the facts here. But there are a few articles that point to a disastrous home life. For one thing, his mom would bring men around constantly, like when his father just was at work.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah, and at 4 years old, it's reported that his uncle sexually assaulted him.
Oh, no.
Yeah, at 5 years old, a neighbor started to do the same.
Oh, God.
One of these assaults, and I'm not sure which one, which man it was, but it lasted until he was 20 years old.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so there was a lot of, mental trauma.
Yeah.
Also, at 12 years old, he falls off a truck and splits his head open, resulting in a 12-centimeter gash on the back of his head.
God, this guy's head has been through a lot.
Yeah, so more head trauma. So he dropped out of school in the 9th grade. He did obtain his GED at some point, and he began to work in hospitals when he was 18 years old. He says his fascination with death began after visiting his dying grandfather at Marymount Hospital in London, Kentucky. He apparently was there a lot, so they offered him a job as an orderly.
Wow, that's all you have to do to become an orderly back then?
Right.
Just be at the hospital a lot?
Right. I understand that this is the 70s, but how do you just secure this medical job where you have no employment history, you have no experience, and you're in charge of cleaning up after patients and handing out medication, like controlled like substances sometimes. Yeah. He also like put in catheters and monitored oxygen.
The 70s was an exciting time, wasn't it?
Yeah, apparently, it's like you took your life in your own hands every day.
Yeah.
But he stated that he would get lost and addicted to the power that he felt while controlling all the routines that kept people alive.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah. Yeah. He stated his first killing was on May 30th, 1970, just 2 weeks after he started there, and he suffocated a stroke victim to death.
Oh my God.
Apparently, he saw opportunities and he seized them. That was his MO. That's what he did. The victims were always in poor health or elderly. Marymount Hospital was really busy. They were understaffed. The doctors there were overworked and they were too busy to notice anything. He said it was easy to kill and get away with it. So he did, over and over.
Oh my
he
God.
said most of the doctors would be so overworked, so busy that a patient could die, and the family doctor would not come in and pronounce the person dead. They would send a resident to do that. They'd just pronounce him dead and send him straight to the funeral home.
Oh, wow.
He killed 13 people by smothering them.
Oh, here we go.
He often let the O2 tanks, like the oxygen tanks, run out and he wouldn't change them. He would mix things into their food or their drink. Arsenic, rat poison, and petroleum distillates, which are mineral spirits that remove oil and grease, and kerosene.
That's so horrible.
Apparently cyanide was his biggest go-to.
Oh my God.
And over the years, he collected an astounding 30 pounds of cyanide, which he had slowly pilfered from the hospitals, and he kept them at home for safekeeping. Typically, Harvey would mix a vial of cyanide or arsenic at home, and then he would bring it with him to work. And when no one was around, he'd slip the mixture into the victim's food or pour it directly into their gastric tube.
God, so he would literally just carry cyanide around and then just wait for the opportunity to arrive.
Yes, he was
I am so
horrible.
uncomfortable right now.
I know, he was horrible.
That is so terrifying.
And that was a very terrible way to die. This is painful. This one was the worst that is talked about. Harvey was an orderly, he has to go in patients' rooms. So there was a man in the hospital, his name was Mr. Gilbert, and he was 81 years old, and he thought Harvey was a burglar in his room.
Well, he kind of was.
Well, yeah, he was.
He's there to steal his life.
Well, I don't know if he planned to at that moment, but Mr. Gilbert, who's old, and he mistook Harvey for a burglar, and Gilbert used his bedpan, which back then, I assume were those aluminum ones.
Okay.
And he knocked Harvey unconscious.
Go, Gilbert!
I know. So this 81-year-old overpowered a 19-year-old kid. I just thought that was pretty amazing, but...
Well, who would have seen that coming?
Well, that's just true. So that kind of sealed his fate. And
no.
Harvey was not having that. So apparently when you have to insert catheters, there's different sizes for different genders.
I'm going to stop you right there. This is not a conversation I want to have. I am already so uncomfortable with this story.
I know. So without getting into too many gory details, Mr. Gilbert made him so mad that Harvey ended up torturing him, and it was a very nasty and painful death.
Oh my God.
So yeah, he's straight up evil. So Harvey claims that he was helping people who wanted to die. This is where I insert the eye roll emoji This is not like an assisted suicide. This is not people who like desire to go ahead and die because they're in too much pain. Like, this is not that. These people are not asking to die. He is deciding that. He's taking it upon himself to make the decision for tons of people that it was their time to die. It's crazy. He was not mentally well, obviously. He did try to commit suicide a couple times. One being he set his apartment bathroom on fire, and instead of dying, he was arrested, and he was made to pay a $50 fine.
Wow.
I know. $50 fine. That's it. That's crazy.
That sounds like a community chest card in Monopoly. You set your apartment on fire. Pay $50 to the banker.
I know. It's so weird.
It's almost like a joke.
I know. It's very strange. Later that year, he tried again with NyQuil, so that one didn't work. And then another time he was drunk and he was arrested, and he bragged to the police that he killed 15 people at Marymount Hospital, but the police didn't believe him because he was wasted, so they just thought he was being stupid, so they did nothing. At one point, he stopped working for the hospitals and he enlisted into the Air Force. I couldn't find particular information around this, but he was immediately discharged after enlisting, thus ensuing his third attempt to take his own life, which also failed.
It's kind of ironic that a guy who is so good at taking the lives of other people
couldn't take his own
life.
Right. I think he knew exactly how to do it. I just think maybe he was too scared.
Yeah.
Because he had cyanide.
Yeah.
After the military, he went back into the hospital business and continued his desire for control and obsession with murder. At one point, he dabbled in the occult, which was introduced to him by an ex-boyfriend of his. But finally, in March 1987, a man by the name of John Powell was brought into the hospital due to a motorcycle accident. He ended up dying in his hospital bed. This time, however, when the doctor performed the autopsy on Powell's stomach, he caught an interesting aroma, an aroma of cyanide.
You know what? That right there is the reason why I could not perform autopsies. If you can actually smell the things that you are examining.
Well, that is the interesting part about cyanide. Not everybody can smell it.
What?
Yes. It's very interesting. And I think it's the majority of people can't smell it. So for this body to come across this medical professional who can smell it, it's really crazy.
This is like a supervillain meets a superhero.
I know.
Wow.
It's very strange. And as I was Googling this, I'm like, great. If I ever get investigated, they're going to think I'm trying to murder somebody. Trying to figure out what cyanide smells like, and who can smell it, and how do you smell it, and what's the percentage of people that can smell it.
That is true. The search histories on our computer are really weird.
Yes, it really is. But for those people who can smell it, it has this bitter almond-like odor. So this medical examiner realized in that moment that this man did not die from the injuries he sustained in the motorcycle accident, but from being poisoned. And so he went to those above him, and when they actually started investigating and watching their staff, they realized something was up with Harvey. They brought him in for questioning, and he refused to take a polygraph. And he ended up confessing to killing Powell, the motorcycle rider. He said he felt sorry for Powell, all while keeping a tight lip on the others that he had killed. However, the hospital was catching on rather quickly and realized he was the attending nurse for at least dozens of deaths in 2 different hospitals, one in Kentucky and one in Ohio. So between 1970 and 1971, he killed 13 patients at Marymount Hospital. In a 4-year span, he killed 21 patients in Cincinnati. That's what they know for a fact. Harvey claims he's killed nearly 100 people.
Oh my God.
Police only have evidence to back 37 to 57 people. When prosecutors showed him the names of his victims on a board during his court case, he just laughed.
That's so creepy.
Yeah, it's so weird.
I know I laugh a lot on this podcast, but it's out of pure discomfort.
Oh, yeah. It's like we have to laugh so we don't cry.
Yeah, I don't think Harvey was
It's like that
laughing
nervous
because
laugh.
he was uncomfortable.
No.
It sounds like he really had zero value for human life.
On August 18th, 1987, Harvey was sentenced to 4 20-year to life sentences and fined $270,000. He would serve a few decades in prison when on March 30th of 2017, his cellie beat him to death in his cell.
Oh, wow.
And he died at the age of 64. The Associated Press in 2001 released an article ranking the worst serial killers in the United States. Donald made the number 1 spot, above Ted Bundy, the Zodiac Killer, etc.
Wow.
He made number 1. So that is the case of the Angel of Death.
Well, I've got a mugshot for you, and we've never needed one more than now.
Oh gosh, for sure.
Because your story was straight up disturbing.
Yeah, that's to say it lightly.
Well, this story is kind of disturbing too, but in a very different way. So, back in December of 2019, just a few months ago from the date of this recording, as a train in Phoenix, Arizona was pulling into the station, a woman on board was surprised when another passenger suddenly began trying to wrestle her out of her wheelchair.
What?
Yes, in surveillance footage captured by the railway's security cameras, which I will also post on our Facebook and Instagram, a man on board wearing reindeer slippers can be seen approaching a woman in her wheelchair. He then appears to quickly release both of her chair's wheel locks before trying to roll away the chair itself.
What?
And the woman can be seen like desperately trying to hold on to her wheelchair, but the man eventually manages to pry it loose from her hands and toss her to the floor.
Oh my gosh.
He then steps off the train, pushing her wheelchair in front of him and attempts to escape.
Oh my gosh.
But thanks to a group of heroic passengers who sprang into action, the man doesn't get very far. A couple of men on board pursued him, and the thief quickly abandoned the wheelchair and fled the scene. However, police eventually identified the man as 26-year-old Austin Sherbutt.
Oh, what an unfortunate last name.
It really is. Sorry if we have any Sherbutts listening. And when police finally tracked Sherbutt down to arrest him, they were easily able to identify him due to the fact that he was still wearing his reindeer slippers.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So did he say why he wanted the wheelchair?
So the only thing I can think of is maybe there's some underground wheelchair black market that we don't know about.
Oh my gosh.
But it's also possible he just wanted one of those coveted handicapped parking spots at the grocery store.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's crazy. People be crazy.
Yeah, and in the video, it takes quite some time for the rest of the people on the train to respond. But in their defense, I don't know that I would have been quick to assume this guy was trying to steal this lady's wheelchair in broad daylight.
Right.
If I saw him walk over there and begin wrestling this woman, my first thought would have been, oh my God, I think he's trying to steal her wheelchair. But then my second thought would have been, no, that can't be right. The two must know each other.
Right.
But then when he starts
to steal the wheelchair.
Right. I would have gone back to my original thought of, oh my God, he's trying to steal this woman's wheelchair and gone after them. So you can kind of see the passenger's train of thought on this train of
thought. Yeah, leave that in, please. It's hilarious. I need to know why, though. I need answers. Sure, but reach out. Tell us your side.
Sure, but are you listening? We want to hear your story.
Yes, we do. Well, just a reminder, we love reading stories from our listeners about some of your most frightening experiences. So if you have a story we could share on the podcast, please send it to us at hotcupcoldcasepodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, and even if you don't have a story, please share the podcast with your friends and encourage them to listen. The more listeners we have, the more stories we can collect and share with you.
Also, if you're enjoying the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and other streaming services. The more 5-star ratings and reviews we receive, the easier it becomes for more people to find us in podcast directories. And it's just nicer.
Yeah. And finally, for even more things to keep you up at night, Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Hot Cup Cold Case Podcast, or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hot Cup Cold Case is written and produced by Rachael and myself with music by Young Kool-Aid. If you ever need your mug filled,
Or your spine chilled.
this is Hot Cup.
Cold case.
I saw the weirdest thing in a handicap parking spot at the grocery store a couple months ago.
What?
I saw a guy parked in the handicap spot with the windows on his car rolled down, blaring some Leonard Skinner song, and smoking his pipe with a lit candle, like a lit Yankee candle, sitting on his dashboard, just chilling. And I thought that right there is the American dream, isn't it?
It really is.
Just hanging out in a handicap spot, no place to be, listening to some Leonard Skinner with a Yankee candle on your dashboard.